Monday in Simpsonville, South Carolina. I hope you had a great weekend in your church. We had a great weekend at ours, and we're thankful for that. I've been studying a little bit about the series of questions that were asked of me as a pastor several years back at our church, and they dealt with different things that have always bothered people in the Bible or questions they've always wanted to ask, and we've covered a couple of those already. Tonight I want to cover numerology. More specifically, the question was asked, what is the significance of 666? And where does it come from in the scriptures? And what do you think about it? Well, I thought I would go broaden that a little bit and make a whole sermon out of it and talk about numerology. For many people have made a lot more out of numerology than probably ought to be made. But nevertheless, it is an interesting subject, and one has to be very careful about numbers. As a matter of fact, I remember a story about a man who saw a pretty lady on the street and said, "Could I have your number?" And she thought for a minute, and she said, "Sure, you can." And she took out a little piece of paper and she wrote a telephone number on it. And that night, the man went to his telephone and dialed the number, and he got dial-a-prayer. Well, if you take a look at the scriptures and you plug in, for example, the number 1 and also the word 1, you'll find that it appears a lot of times in the scriptures. And those who really go out on a limb with numerology says that's the number for unity. 2, the number for union. 3, Trinity. And many times they'll tell you that the number appears so many times in Scripture. For example, I found a reference on the internet that 3, the number 3 or the word 3 appears 467 times. Well, I did that with my exhaustive computer program, and I could only come up with a 402, and that was really stretching it. The number 5 for faithfulness, they said 318 times. I could only come up with 253. But we do know there are some numbers that God seems to have used a number of times in the scriptures. For example, the 12 tribes. And then we find the stones on the breastplate of the priest as being 12 stones. We find a number of references symbolic of the 12 tribes of Israel. We know that the number 40, which again, according to some of the computer programs, means testing or judgment. We know that they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. We know that it was 40 days and 40 nights, and we know that number 40 has been used a number of times. We sometimes find that there's a real stretch. For example, the 666 stretch I found in the internet was that Goliath, who represented evil, was 6 cubits high. He wore 6 pieces of armor, and the tip of his spear weighed 600 shekels, 666. Well, to me that's going a little bit far. If you want to look it up, you'll find it in 1 Samuel 17, verses 4 through 7, but it just seems like a real stretch to me. So where did the number 666 come from? Well, it comes out of the book of Revelation, and it is a very real number there, and the fact that you'll find in Revelation chapter 13, verse 17, the number of his name is written. You'll find in Revelation 13:18 that the number of his name was 666. You'll find that the references of the mark of the beast would be the mark of the number of his name, found in 14:11, Revelation 14:11. In Revelation 16:2, you'll find that when judgment is poured out on the earth, that those that didn't have the mark of the beast were spared, and those that had the mark of the beast wound up with malignant tumors. You'll find that those that didn't have the mark of the beast in Revelation 20, verse 4, were the ones that reigned with Christ on earth for 1,000 years. So we do find the mark of the beast specifically called out to be the number of his name being 666. However, I do have to chuckle a little bit in the fact that many people think that if someone were to embed a chip in their body so that they can buy or sell, that chip would have the number 666 in it. I don't know. That seems, again, a little bit of a stretch to me. But the scripture does say that those that didn't have the mark of the beast wouldn't be able to buy or sell. So, I certainly see where they get that and where the emphasis is placed. And certainly the tattoo that I would never have put on my body is 666. But I think it's important for us to realize that while numbers may have significance in the scripture, the loaves of showbread in the holy place was 12 for the tribes of Israel. The stones on the breastplate of the priest was 12. We find the 40 used over and over again. But I think we have to be careful about overemphasizing numbers. As a matter of fact, I think that because 7 is a lucky number, if you will, for Christians, because it represents completeness. That a lot of people want 7s in their telephone number, or they want 7s on their car, or whatever they are doing. Their lucky number is 7. I think we can overdo it and we start worshiping the numbers instead of the maker. And we got to be very, very careful that we don't allow the numbers to drive us. They can be symbolic, and we probably, every time we see a number, think, where else is that number used? What is the significance of it? But I think that we have to be very, very careful that we don't start getting superstitious, if you will, about numbers, and that we wind up having false beliefs and we start worshiping numbers instead of worshiping the Master. So I think it's very, very important for you to realize the number 666 is a biblical number. And you might say, well, then, it's a really negative number. Maybe yes and maybe no. Certainly the mark of the beast in 666 is an unlucky number. But if you were to go back and look at the story of Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 14 and 15, you'll find that Solomon was paid 666. And it represented wealth. Now you might say, well, it was wealth that was Solomon's undoing. Well, you can go on and on and on and on and justify all kinds of things. But I don't think that you ought to always relate anything with a 6 in it as being satanic. And I don't think every time you see the number 666, you should see that as satanic. The mark of the beast certainly is satanic. And we should certainly not deliberately and willfully allow somebody to put 666 on us to buy and sell, because we know then we've accepted the mark of the beast. But I think we got to be careful that we don't worship numbers and get too caught up in numbers. So I hope that you'll look at 1 Kings 10, 14, and 15 and see that they were numbers of wealth for Solomon, and realize it also represents evil. And the mark of the beast in Revelation chapter 13 all the way through chapter 20, we see that number used in a negative way, sometimes just by mention of the number of his name rather than the actual number 666, because actually the number 666, the best I can tell, only appears once in Scripture, and that's in Revelation chapter 13, verse 18. So really the number doesn't appear very many times. But don't get superstitious and don't get overly distraught if you happen to get a license plate that has a 6 in it, or if you happen to get a telephone number with 6 in it, or 666 in it. What you don't want to do is worship the evil one, or his image, or the number of his name. That's what it tells us in the Scripture. It says, don't worship the beast, don't worship his number, don't worship his name, and certainly don't accept from him the number that allows you to buy and sell. I think it's important for us to stay away from that. You might also find it very interesting that the 3 for the Trinity is 402 times in Scripture. And so we see some significance with 3s as well. Again, be careful. Jehovah's Witnesses put an overemphasis on numerology, and we know that they're off in their doctrine, so be very, very careful about the numerology and getting overly concerned about numbers. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.